NucSoc this year, and I am a first-year PhD student working in advanced manufacturing. I'd like to welcome you all to Networking in NucSoc, Industry Alumni, a careers event hosted by the University of Birmingham Nuclear Society, otherwise known as NucSoc. This is our first careers event of the year of this kind, so we hope you all enjoy it and take the chance to listen to some of our really successful alumni that we've invited here today, and they'll be talking about their experiences in industry. So I will be chairing this session with the help of Molly Service, who is our Vice President of NucSoc, and she will be taking care of our chat and your questions today in the Q&A. She will also be posting a feedback form in the chat after the event. Please try and fill this out if you can. As I mentioned, this is the first time we've run an event of this kind, so any sort of feedback you can give us would be really appreciated. So to start the first hour of our event, we'll be hearing from 4 of our alumni working in the nuclear industry. And firstly, we will be hearing from Stacy Snook. Stacy is an alumni from NucSoc who studied nuclear science and materials, as well as physics and technology of nuclear reactors. Stacy now works at Sellafield in insider threat analysis and mitigation. So Stacy, whenever you're ready, let's get started.
Thank you, Emily. So good afternoon. So firstly, thank you to Emily Lewis and Molly Service for inviting me along today and organising the event. It's nice to see. I wish we had more of this when I was at university. So my name is Stacy Snook. I've just finished the Sellafield graduate scheme and now work in a permanent role in nuclear security at Sellafield, looking at insider threat mitigation and analysis. It's nice to be back, or at least just virtually. And it feels just like 5 minutes since I was a student sat in Pointing doing my lectures. So it's quite scary how quickly time does go by. So I do believe it must be quite a difficult time to be at university under lockdown and in quite a stressful situation, doing quite an intense course. That was far more stressful than when I was at university. So hopefully today's useful. And the aim of my talk really is just to kind of provide an insight into what I've done since finishing the University of Birmingham and to get to know some of you, and hopefully that's useful. I can't see the slides. Can we go on to the next slide if that's all right? Cool. So before we start, I thought it'd be useful just to mention today I'm just in a personal capacity, so even though I do work at Sellafield, I'm not representing Sellafield today. I'm on annual leave, so any views I do express are mine and not any company I do discuss. So thought I'd just stay in the clear by saying that. If we could go on to the next slide. So as I tried to keep today a little bit more chatty and informal, so I thought I'd talk about who I am, which sounds like a simple question, but it's a bit of a weird one talking about yourself. So I live in the Lake District in the UK, up in Cumbria, working at Sellafield Limited on the Sellafield site normally, but working from home in the current conditions. So Lake District, it's quite rural, quite a change from Birmingham to the Lake District. But it's a good place to live, as you can see. Spend a lot of time in the lakes. On pictures is me kind of wild swimming in the Lake District, do a lot of kayaking. It's a good place to get outside and it's quite a good way to de-stress. And I've also taken up running under lockdown. Probably the world's worst runner, but why not try it? In normal conditions, I do quite like traveling. So I got a picture of myself and 2 friends when we road tripped Iceland in February, just before lockdown. So it's quite nice to get that in before COVID kicked off. I've done a lot of charity work throughout my life. I built a school in Africa when I was quite young. I've done a lot of charity work with my sister, and I also support my old secondary school. So through work like that, I'm a freeman of the City of London, and I've got freedom of freedom of the city, which is quite nice to have. And lastly, I'm a University of Birmingham alumni, and I'm still really good friends with the people who I did go to university with. So we do keep in contact. We talk at least once a week, virtually or on the phone, which is really quite nice that those relationships have lasted. And we're all in industry, so it's nice when we do bump into each other. So as Emily said, did nuclear science materials 2013 to 2016, and then physics and technology and nuclear reactors 2016 to 2017. So can we go to the next slide, please? So I kind of thought it would be useful to kind of talk about my journey throughout university, but I don't really want it to just be me kind of dumping my CV on the screen. So as I mentioned, started in 2013 as a little fresher, a long time ago now. And then end of second year, I did an internship at EDF Energy's Hesium 2 nuclear power station. That was working in the nuclear safety group, just kind of getting an appreciation for the refueling strategy to optimize the reactor output, looking at safety cases and nuclear site licensing. So kind of very much shadowing a team that's kind of very physics based. And it was quite cool to kind of step away from a textbook and see a reactor in person, and standing on top of the pile cap is quite a crazy experience. So it's good to see it come alive. But that time was very much, just shadowing people, seeing a lot, learning what the workplace was, because it is a completely different environment to university. So in 2016, I started PT&R, graduating from undergraduate. PT&R kind of appealed to me because it's a lot more applied, and I quite liked the idea of doing your placement in industry. So moved on to that. And my time at EDF, a lot of people had done PT&R, so I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Why not give that a go? So I did PT&R, and then I went back to EDF to do my master's thesis in the nuclear fuel group at Barnwood, so like their technical office. It was very, very technical nuclear work, which was kind of, it felt very satisfying completing my thesis, but I learned a lot in terms of, this probably isn't for me, sat behind a screen coding. So in that sense, I realized, okay, I probably don't want to do work like that going forward. So that's when I kind of applied to the Sellafield graduate scheme, and I had that offer. And with Sellafield, they recruit really, really early. I think applications open maybe even a year before you start. It's quite crazy. So I had that offer whilst I was in EDF, but that was for like the following year. So I decided, why not take a gap year? So after finishing university, I just thought, you need to look after yourself and just go and enjoy yourself. I was born in South Africa, and a lot of my family are over there, so I just thought, why not go spend time with them? And then in 2018, I joined the Sellafield graduate scheme as a safety graduate. And then I went to work with the Environment, Safety and Security Director. So I had a bit of a broader experience in terms of safe environment and security, as well as safety. And then I moved into security at the end of the graduate scheme, and that's where I work now. So yeah, that's a little bit about how I've got here, or how I got out of university. You could go on to the next slide, please. So I thought it'd be quite useful to just talk about what I've done in the industry so far, because when I first joined Sellafield and relocated to Cumbria, I was quite apprehensive. It's a big move away into a part of the country which I didn't know anyone. I had no family nearby, wasn't an area I was familiar with. I kind of thought, I was quite nervous about it. So I kind of thought, I want to make sure I make the most of this opportunity, because it is a good opportunity. So I kind of just threw myself into groups like the Society of Radiation Protection, and the Nuclear Institute, and did a lot of the Institute of Physics, so a lot of outreach activities, which is such a great way to kind of build a community, particularly if you're new to an area. And also you kind of give back, and communicating nuclear physics to audiences who have no background in it and trying to make it sound interesting and not have it be so technical and that be a barrier is quite interesting. So we've done the Birmingham Big Bang Fair. We were going to do it, but COVID, but we did it the year before last, and that was really good fun. Teaching kids about radiation and having detectors that kind of like, you can simulate radiation, get children to like look for it. And we also put on we helped put on a physics production, based on the life of Marie Curie. So we worked with like a puppetry group and a drama group, and they kind of put this whole production on which like toured the country, which was quite interesting to go back and watch it. So it's kind of, I quite liked how it linked like the physics community and the arts community. It's quite nice we work together. I've also had opportunities to travel. So I've been to the International Atomic Energy Agency to do work with the World Institute of Nuclear Security, who I do work with now. So that was a really good insight into like huge decision making in the industry, and a nice trip to Vienna. So that work kind of involved getting about, I think it was 30 nuclear professionals in a room from different countries, particularly a lot of people from developing countries, to kind of look at challenges, what's going on, how can we all work together, share information, share learning, which I thought was really good fun and really did feel like we were kind of making an impact. So I continue to do work with World Institute of Nuclear Security now, and that's kind of make changes in nuclear security, which is typically kind of like a field which a lot of ex-military people work in. So how can we make that kind of more accessible to kind of newcomers into the industry? So I do really enjoy that element of my work. Can we go on to the next slide? So another slide of pictures. So I kind of thought about how would I sum up my first 2 years in the industry. So I kind of concluded that I've always felt like I've had a voice, and I've always felt like I've had a community. So I've been to many events, particularly with the Nuclear Institute and the Young Generation Network, which I'm happy to give more information on another time if you're interested in getting more involved. So we've been to lots of conferences. We've worked quite closely with like our executive, who are always happy to give their time and hear about young people's views and what we kind of want to see in the industry, which is nice to, it's nice to be in that environment. I won the Nuclear Institute Young Generation Excellence Award, quite a long title, last year, which is quite nice for work trying to encourage and develop the UK's early career nuclear professionals, which was nice to have. It's nice to get recognition for that sort of work. I've also put on conferences with my friends. So we did a 3-day nuclear waste management conference, which was intense to do. We learned an awful lot of like soft skills, like opening up a conference, looking after people. People have a lot of needs, like dietary requirements. Yeah, it's quite a responsibility. Also, I've done an interview with the Nuclear Institute for their magazine, which was quite cathartic to kind of look back. What have I done in the nuclear industry? But also a little bit weird, but also nice. So I've also did a webinar on insider threats, which is my job. That's bottom middle picture, which was so weird to kind of to go up against people who are industry experts, and they're all quite senior in their field, and then there's me. I like to think I kind of held my own, but it wasn't without a bit of nerves, but it was good fun. It's nice to do it in the end. And it's nice to talk about my job. And then again, a picture of work with the World Institute of Nuclear Security, which complements my day job. I do a lot of insider threat work. So that kind of goes on to what is an insider threat? So if we can go on to that slide. So insider threats, it's something we don't really talk about generally, but I don't think it's covered at all in our undergraduate course or postgraduate course. So what is an insider? So at high level, it's anyone who misuses legitimate access. So the definition we kind of use in the UK is taken from the Centre for the Protection of National Infrastructure, which is a government department who do threat analysis. And they kind of say it a bit more eloquently. So an insider is defined as a person who exploits or has the intention to exploit legitimate access to an organisation's assets for unauthorised purposes. So insider motivations vary greatly. So and often are a combination. So it could be coercion, but also could be disgruntlement, financial gain, revenge, notoriety, as well as like a political or religious ideology. And all organisations are vulnerable to insider threats, which are either deliberate or unwitting, so accidental. And we often don't need to look too far to find examples of insider threats. So I did a little search of the University of Birmingham, and I found somebody who had hacked the computer system to alter his exam results. So every organisation has insider threats, different motivations. So if the University of Birmingham have them, what does that mean for the nuclear industry? And what are the consequences of somebody misusing legitimate access? Go on to the next slide. So again, so insider threats are anyone who just misuses legitimate access. And it would be reassuring if the intelligence agencies were immune to insider threats as well. So opposite end of the spectrum, so high consequence organisations. However, this is certainly not the case. We're all familiar with Edward Snowden, who leaked highly classified information from NSA in 2013, when he was a CIA employee and subcontractor. So if the most elite and highly effective national security organisations have had many serious problems with insider threats, surely this suggests other organisations will also face difficulties. I think with insider threats, it's often difficult knowing the truth. No organisation really wants to talk about how many threats they have, what their employees are doing, particularly if they're trusted individuals who have had security vetting. But cases from the intelligence agencies are useful as it kind of focuses the severity of why we need to consider them. So they also have happened in the nuclear industry, and there's lots of really high profile cases. So while high profile incidents involving insiders who have successfully stolen nuclear material or sabotaged facilities in the nuclear industry are thankfully rare, there are a number of real life cases, which I'll mention really briefly due to the time constraints, but I'm happy to always discuss more at a later date. So deliberate acts of sabotage cannot be ruled out. So the bottom left image, a reactor in Belgium was shut down after somebody purposely destroyed a turbine by draining it of oil. No radioactive material was released, but the cost of the damage and the 4-month downtime caused an estimated $200 million worth of damage, which made it one of the largest economic sabotages of all time. Secondly, Stuxnet, so that's a malicious computer worm, which is believed to be responsible for causing substantial damage to Iran's nuclear program by destroying the centrifuges. An insider would have had to insert a USB drive or similar somewhere in the system. So the third image at the bottom is A.Q. Khan, so whose name is synonymous with insider threat, and he had stolen centrifuge designs from Urenco, which eventually found their way to Pakistan, Libya, North Korea, Iran, and China. So nuclear espionage. in 1992, Leonid Smirnov carried out the protracted theft, so stealing really small quantities of, over a long period of time, of highly enriched uranium. He managed to get it up to about 1.5 kilograms of uranium. And that was just a financially motivated incident brought about due to the worsening condition in Russia, but he had managed to get that past the security processes in place. And lastly, I think it's important to remember that low-level incidents which do not involve nuclear material or sabotage happen to businesses all the time, and they can be malicious or unwitting. So unwitting is kind of just the opening a spam email, or particularly with the sudden move to remote working, a lot of people emailed kind of classified information to personal email addresses just to ensure they can just keep doing their day job. So they didn't mean any harm, but it is like a loss of control. So real life case studies in the nuclear industry are quite good at just highlighting the danger and the reality. So a lot of these incidents, they sound really quite fictional. So somebody sabotaging reactors, but it's happened, and that's what we have to kind of think about moving forward. Like, how can we prevent harm happening, so we can continue to use nuclear material purposefully? So you can go on to the next slide, please. So that's a little bit about insider threats, and what I do is just looking to minimise them by looking at like the early detection and looking at like the impact of COVID-19. That's caused a lot of implications on mental health. So how will that impact the workforce? How can we mitigate that and provide support so we don't have huge problems like exasperating? So overall, I do feel that the work I do does make an impact, and protecting nuclear and other radioactive material is what we do, really. So we can continue to kind of use that to improve lives, feed the world by protecting crops, making sick people well through nuclear medicine, and powering entire cities through building reactors, which is what we really want to do. So I kind of thought I'd include what I kind of want to do next going forward. So I think I'd kind of, I want to continue just to work hard and build a foundation and build credibility. I always want to kind of also work with charities and support lots of different communities and support individuals who want to enter the nuclear industry. I think I always want to have a component like that. I also want to continue to develop skills and have lots of different experiences to continue to grow. I think if I ever stagnate and don't feel like I'm kind of learning lots and seeing lots, I think that's when I would look to kind of move on or look at gaining more experiences. Lastly, I think at some point I would quite like to go back to university or work with Sellafield to do a PhD on insider threats, because I do think it's a really interesting area. I'm not sure that will be the University of Birmingham, but I think that's a cool thing to do going forward. So go on the next slide, please. So part of me always feels a little bit strange giving career advice, because I do feel a bit too young or underqualified and underexperienced to do so. But I kind of thought with a few of my friends, what would we kind of want to know when we were university students? So we kind of concluded, take risks and don't be afraid to fail. I've learned far more during turbulent times and having doors close on me than when times are going easy and going swimmingly. Believe in yourself, which is much easier to say than do sometimes. But we all have such diverse ways of thinking and such different skill sets. And there's a place in the nuclear industry for absolutely everyone. So it's a welcoming kind of industry. So step out of your comfort zone and step up to opportunities beyond your day job to really do help build experiences. Lastly, aim high. We all underestimate our abilities. As a university student, I never anticipated that my rather short career would take me to so many places it has done, and has given me lots of opportunities to make an impact. And I do feel very happy in my chosen career. which is really nice to say. So lastly, I may not have all the answers, but I'm always willing to give people my time. If anybody has any more questions, I'm always happy to help. And I do look forward to meeting you all under maybe more normal circumstances if our paths do cross. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, Stacey. That was really interesting. I was talking to some of my friends about insider risk and threats, and as you've mentioned, it's not something we cover in the course, so it's really, really enlightening to hear about it, and just to teach our students more about that is fantastic. Thank you. So now we're moving on to a talk from Emin, Veron. Emin is an alumni from nuclear engineering who now works at the National Nuclear Laboratory. Emin, I'm going to stop sharing my slides. Are you ready to share?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Let me just let's go through the humiliating bit where we see if my internet will carry this. But it should be fine.
Thank you.
But I'll say thank you, Emily and Molly, for actually organising this. This is, I think, this is a really good opportunity, really, just to give a bit of insight into all the different pathways available. And similarly to Stacy, some of the stuff there is really fascinating. I had no idea really that we look into things like that. And as at Sellafield, so yeah, that was I guess I learned something as well. I guess let me just share my screen and switch it to full screen. I thought I'd just give a quick few minutes on just the lab and what it does, because I remember from years ago in my secondary school when I had a careers event, and I remember having I think it was a chartered surveyor gave a good half an hour talk about being a chartered surveyor, and got to the end of it, and I still to this day don't really know what they do. So I thought I would just go through quickly just the lab and its role, and how it links into everything as well. So National Nuclear Lab, it's it's the UK's only fission lab, and it's a government-owned but not government-funded organisation. And so we have three main roles. One is to perform national strategic work, so looking at things that are useful to the UK, working in areas of nuclear science that are useful to the country, but won't necessarily have a commercial agenda to it. That would be your plutonium, that would be your some of your waste, something to do with waste. It's got a role as a UK technical advisor as well. So that'll be through our sister organisation called NIRO, where we send some of our graduates and some of our mid-career professionals to provide independent advice on nuclear, some of the more complicated nuclear issues. And we also have a commercial arm as well, which looks at some of the front end and a lot of the back end of the nuclear fuel cycle. There's about 1,000 of us at the lab, and with quite a large majority of technical staff, and with a turnover of about £100 million every year. With regards to its actual positioning, as I said, it's owned by government, but we get our contracts through the NDA site license sites, notably Sellafield, but other ones as well. And we try to sit in the TRL position, sort of bridging the valley of death to some extent, looking at taking some concepts from university and trying to nuclearize them and transfer them into industry. So that's sort of where the lab really places itself and the sort of R&D level. Some of the things that we do is strategic things such as performing PIE on the graphite and fuel that comes out of reactors. And in terms of sort of more of the forward-facing stuff as well, we do a lot of work looking into nuclear new build and some research into near-surface geological disposal as well. So it's quite a broad range of activities, really. Some of the more exciting stuff as well includes a bit of work looking into space batteries. So that would be like harvesting americium from spent fuel and using that for radioisotope generators. And as I mentioned before, there's just some stuff on strategic work as well. This was previously headed by Fiona Raymond as a director of NIRO, but she's now taken an executive role as the Chief Science and Technology Officer within NNL. So just as almost a whistle through tour, that's sort of what the lab does. But I guess probably more pertinent and sort of maybe the focus of this is sort of how did I sort of end up in NNL? Sort of what led me there, what were my sort of barriers, that I faced and some of the things that I do in my role as well. So just to give a quick overview of that, I started off in 2014 on the nuclear engineering course, which I studied. I spent most of my time hanging around METMAT, and I spent the whole sort of 4 years doing my dissertation in hydrogen storage with solid state sort of vectors. So that would be your metal hydrides and variants within those. But I spent time in the labs with Zani and doing some of the radiometric work as well. I think while I was within the UOB, I managed to get myself a placement at CCFE, and I did really enjoy that. And I was based down in the Cullum labs, going and doing some neutronics work. So having a little bit of look of MCMP, but a lot of gamma spectrometry as well. I think for me, I enjoyed it, but I think what occurred to me was that I think it was very much a case of I didn't want just a desk job. I wanted to do a few different things, and I think for me, I didn't want to go into an entirely technical role. I think as well, another thing that sort of shaped my viewpoint in going into more the fission side of things was an experience that I had, which was the trip to Jarmen for the nuclear summer school that I think Alessandro kindly organised for us. That was looking into some of the nuclear decommissioning technologies that were about and up and coming to the sector, and as well as trips to reactors that were being built. And obviously you spent a good month or so in and around China, so it was quite exciting sort of looking at the different the cultural differences, but then also you get that sense of energy when you were looking at it, because the speed at which they're building reactors is phenomenal. They spend like I think the rate at which when we were there, they were able to get one reactor done every year, which is approximately sort of 10 times faster than the way that we do it normally. And so it really hammered home to me that there's a very credible future in nuclear. And so I think that sort of prompted me to go into NNL. So I applied through the grad scheme, and they put me on a technical role up in Sellafield, based in the lab that we're renting out in there. So that was in what's known as the in situ measurement analysis team. And that what they do essentially is they look at the packaging around cans that go into long-term storage, and then produce sensors, electronics and software to assess whether or not the cans are behaving like they should in storage, and things for inspection, remote operation, and lots of things to do with characterization, and making sure that interface between the thing that you're using to do the characterization and the operators pretty much safety proof and user proof as well. So what I was doing there was looking at visual inspection systems, so barcode readers, looking into so the cans when they're in storage, they have so you got your nuclear waste and you've got your cans within that, but some of the intermediate cans, they've got a barcode which is imprinted in, and it's not a visual barcode, it's a physical sort of imprint of a code. And so you use magnetic sort of sensors to actually measure that, eddy current sensor at a distance to actually measure that barcode and actually determine who owns it, what's in there, and things like that. And I thought that was quite interesting. So while I was there as well, I was up in Cumbria, up in Whitehaven. So I had a lot of fun sort of exploring the Lake District and moving up there. That was quite fun, just because it, for the first part of it was had quite a Bear Grylls feel to it, in that I landed there, empty house, had to get the furniture in there. It's a completely different sort of environment to Birmingham. It's fresh air, but also the culture is really different. People are quite friendly and quite warm and welcoming, and for me that was a bit of a shock. You go out the door, people say hello to you. Oh God, yeah. So it was. I think it made me a lot more outgoing, and I did really quite enjoy that experience. I think around the 2018, sort of mid 2019 mark, I got an offer for a role to work in the innovation team within NNL, and that's where I'm at currently. And it's almost like a hybrid technical and non-technical role. So I guess that's sort of, what I was going to go into now is, sort of what I do on a day-to-day basis, really. So I have really sort of three main sort of functions within the innovation team, because I think innovation is very much seen as a corporate buzzword, so it's probably worth articulating what actually innovation is. It's not necessarily invention. I think it's the idea that a lot of good ideas come from both experts and non-experts, and it's that process of actually managing that the ideation from TRL1 and getting it into something workable from a prototype all the way down to something that gets used in industry, and trying to do it in a way that does generate revenue and also meets the needs of the of the NDA with regards to the actual nuclear program on the whole. The way that NNL does that is one of the routes within there is a funding pot, an innovation funding. So there's about several hundred K or so attributed to inventions within the company. And so what happens is that through the pipeline of ideas and submissions, I get a number of applications for ideas, be that for something to do with nuclear robotics. It could very well be just a process improvement procedure. It can be stuff to do with nuclear data and nuclear modeling, and it's assessing whether or not the idea is being fleshed out well enough. It's looking at whether or not there's that there's a pipeline of work at the end of that's likely to happen. Looking for the showstoppers as well. If someone's suggesting something to do with transmutation, you'd firstly you'd think to yourself and review it and look at whether or not that particular invention is credible. Are they transmuting in a way that's going to produce more waste or less waste? Is that actually something that we've got the facilities to do? And so in many ways I act as one of the gatekeepers of funding in that respect there. But saying that, some of the other business as usual stuff that I do is things that are enablers to innovation. So looking at the capability across NNL and mapping that, and that's quite fun because you get to use pretty much your whole degree, because you're looking at every aspect of the fuel cycle, and you're talking with the experts there to try and flesh out on the page and say, is this what you actually do? What parts don't you do? How deep's your capability in that area? And then that links into other aspects as well. So like I'll be helping facilitate workshops with customers. So for example, within an EDF, they have technical workshops, and you learn the skills and soft skills around facilitating an event in that respect, but also you learn the techniques associated with trying to get the best ideas out of people, because a lot of the time, I think one way they were referred to it at work was hippos. Was you call them the highest paid people in the room. Is that generally when they speak, and it's a bit like your lecturers, you trust them and you listen to what they have to say, but it means that a lot of the people that are less senior tend to not talk up as much. So it's learning about the techniques in which you can make sure that there isn't a great idea that's being sort of thrown away and it's kept quiet because someone didn't want to put their head up or felt shy to. And associated with that as well is doing some things like bringing people into who've just come into the industry and giving them an orientation. So like one aspect I do in that is like a mini induction for new starters within the company. I think that's the sort of business as usual. I think some of the more projecty stuff that I get involved in as well is using my degree and doing research into avenues that the company might want to go to in the future. So I think one example that I've given is NNL at the moment is looking into the role that nuclear could play in production of hydrogen using nuclear energy. The reason for this is that I guess a lot of you are familiar with the idea that fossil fuels make up something like 40 to 50% of our electricity generation. Nuclear makes up about 20%, and the rest is a mixture of renewables and carbon neutral technologies. If you actually look at the data from from government, Business Energy Industrial Strategy has a document called the Duke's Digest of UK Energy Statistics. If you look at, for example, the 2019 stats, which I've got up here, that mix of technologies only makes up something around a third of all of our energy usage on the the top left on the top left diagram here. Our natural gas and our oil and others, so that would be your chemical feedstocks and things like wood and paper and things like that. That makes up 2/3 of it, and it's not necessarily the easiest thing to replace. We can't just electrify it or replace it with renewables or with even we can replace it with cleaner fossil fuels, but you still have the problem that you're producing a ton of carbon dioxide, especially when you have a look on the right hand side there. You've got lots and lots and lots of different end users for electricity, and energy per se. You know, you can't necessarily convert all your cars to electric straight away because it creates, you know, absolute demand on the grid. And also you've got issues with battery technology as well. We're not necessarily just there yet for a complete rollout. So if we're really going to combat climate change and we're really going to meet net zero and all these other challenges we really need to do to, you know, prevent sort of destruction we're doing to our environment, one of the options that we're looking into there is seeing whether or not you can use the efficiencies and the temperatures that you get from nuclear and use that to actually drive a hydrogen reaction instead. And you know, I find that really fascinating because it's quite a new area of technology, and I think in many ways nuclear hasn't really had a look in just yet. And you know, in the long term, there's going to have to be a absolute ramp up in our ability to produce stuff without having to rely on natural gas, and this is definitely a very credible option. You know, I guess associated with that as well is that because there's lots of new technologies, I get approached by externals a lot just to review their processes and their technology and see if there's any useful within the nuclear industry. A lot of the moment, it seems to be graphene technologies that come forwards. But then there's other ones, for example, different people looking for different kinds of radioisotopes from various places, including from Sellafield, but also from other avenues, and seeing if they can develop those in our labs and then use them for specific purposes. A lot of the time you come down to it and you find out there isn't that much around. But one thing that we are looking into is the americium, because spent fuel has plutonium, which then decays down to americium in it due to I think captures of neutrons that are actually in the decaying fuel. And you know, those are in your fire alarms, but they're very they've got like a half-life of about 400 years, and they can really because of that, they make really good heat sources for long-term storage. So things like in batteries for spacecraft. If you're sending them on a longer mission, like I think one of the Voyagers that's gone and left the solar system is powered by an americium source. So there's lots of stuff there, and I think in terms of the business as usual stuff that comes in as well, is lots of technologies around decommissioning. So the one that we got there is I think NNL's version of MAPS, which is it looks into a pipe-based sort of scanning system. But there's lots of other stuff that we've been involved in. For example, with it's called raw water. It's a technology that uses a lead bismuth alloy as an almost a way to stop leakages in situ without having to actually shut down your plant. So say if your tire bursts, you can go fill that in with that lead alloy to harden for to carry on for a period of time until you can actually maintain what you need. So that's sort of some of the stuff that we end up looking at and some of the projects that I look into. But I guess just to summarize that, I've got lots of things in train, all different sort of activities from technical to non-technical, and including things like organizing sessions with experts and some equality, diversity and inclusion work as well. I think for me, I guess what I quite like about my role is that it does let me use my technical background quite broadly, but then it lets me talk to people as well, and it lets me work on multiple things at once, which I find a lot more interesting than necessarily drilling down. But that might not necessarily be what you're looking for per se. Like I think some of the things to consider when I have actually spent 2 years in industry as well is that you can make a choice between working more hands-on technical in a lab a bit further out, or you could work a bit more focused at a computer doing more technical work with coding as well. It doesn't have to just be a choice between working technically outside or working in a more sort of people-based role inside in a city. You just have to really decide whether or not you want to do it hands-on or hands-off, because you can get desk-based roles and work in a city as well. I think one of the main reasons people sort of look over the nuclear industry is the fact that our nuclear facilities tend to be by the sea, so it tends to mean you're further out of a city. I guess my message to you is that there's lots of opportunities within the industry, and depending on what you want, you can find it, and it's just worth having the time to sort of have a look inside the industry and sort of pursue what you're looking for as well. I think if you work hard and if you have got that sort of open mindset, you can find what you're looking for. And I guess as well, I think Stacy highlighted there's actually a lot of opportunities to actually go and do things within the industry that you would never think would be open to you at a junior level. So like I got offered in February a chance to go and present at a JAA conference, joint with the CEA conference in Paris, to go and present on my view on innovation. within the nuclear industry. And I thought that was a really great opportunity just to meet, you know, some faces from all the way across the world, but then also, you know, to get their viewpoints as well. You tend to find that nuclear has the same issues in different countries. And it really opened my eyes to actually see just how much energy and movement happening, not just in the UK, but worldwide on this as well. You know, saying that as well, I think there's nuclear competitions, which even at your level now, you could be entering. Like, for example, there's a Spark competition that's run, which is done between the UK and France, French embassies, that looking at low carbon energy between England and France. And, you know, if you qualify for a finalist in that, you get a trip, either a trip to Paris or a trip to the UK, and you get to see, you know, a whole bunch of sites. I think I got the opportunity to go and network inside the French ambassador's residence, and that was quite an experience as well. And, you know, and even if you don't want to go down that route, you know, within Cumbria, you've got a whole adventure there realistically. You know, you can go, it's a pretty wild place, and there's lots and lots of, you know, people doing lots of outgoing and outdoorsy things. So, you know, there's definitely lots to consider within there. So I guess that's sort of my sort of blast there. I'll leave a photo that we took from China. It was left on the wall in one of the restaurants there. But if you have any further questions, please contact Emily or Molly. I'm happy to answer anything else further after this event. And you know, with everything going on, good luck with your modules. You know, I appreciate that you guys are. Yeah, it's quite a rough time to be studying something so intense. You know, whilst largely locked inside. So you know, good luck to everyone, really.
Thank you for that, Emin. That was really interesting, particularly hearing about innovation as well. It's really interesting to see how ideas can go from academia to industry, particularly with your cans, because I know Alison Davenport works on can design as well, with a corrosion kind of aspect. Yeah. So it's interesting that there's that link of research in Birmingham with your work as well.
Yeah, I did. I can't remember who it was, but I remember going, looking over. So there's like we do retention of critical knowledge sessions where you go and get an expert that's like 30, 40 years into their career, and you try and get as much out of them as you can. And they were like, Professor Davenport was sort of on one of the lists. And I was like, oh yeah, do you know her? It's like, yeah. And it was just really weird to see that someone knows them on like a first name basis, and when they're, they're your lecturer. So I thought that was quite an interesting sort of insight.
And the nuclear industry as well, it's a smaller kind of group of people than you think. So like, it seems like everyone knows everyone really.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you. That was fantastic. So now I'll just share my screen. So we can now move on to our next set of talks. So I'll just introduce. So next we will be hearing a set of talks from UKAEA, so the UK Atomic Energy Authority. And today we've invited Alex Valentine and Stephen Bradnam, who will be talking about their experiences. And they are alumni from physics in the School of Physics and Astronomy, as well as PT&R students as well. So if you're happy to share your screens, guys, take it away.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. I think Steve's going to share his screen.
Can everybody see that?
Not yet.
Can't see anything yet, sorry.
Oh, yeah, hang on.
It's loading something. Okay.
Yeah, I can see that now. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thanks again, go to Emily for organising this event. So my name is Alex Valentine, and I'll be presenting with Stephen Bradnam, and we're both from the Applied Radiation Technology group here at the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority. So first of all, I'll give you a bit of background about myself and Steve. So we both did a straight degree in physics, graduating in 2015. We then went to the MSc Physics and Technology of Nuclear Reactors course, which we completed in 2016. So as part of this course, as many of you will be aware, you have to do a summer placement, which you'll write your thesis on. So we both did this based here at UKAEA over the summer. And following this, we were fortunate to be taken on almost immediately, initially as contractors, and then we progressed to permanent staff members in the summer of 2017, and we've been there since. So just briefly on the work which we do. So my actual title is Radiation Transport Analyst. So this basically involves doing what we call neutronics calculations in support of JET, ITER and DEMO. So these are fusion reactors across the world, which I'll give a bit more information on shortly. But basically a lot of the work involves using Monte Carlo codes to perform radiation transport calculations to basically characterize the radiation field in fusion reactors. And on the left here, you can see a picture of me. This is ITER. So this is a fusion reactor which is being built currently in the south of France. So this picture doesn't really represent very well my day job. I don't work in construction as such, but nonetheless represents that while a lot of our work is calculation based, we do a lot of travel. By nature of the research we do, we attend quite a lot of conferences, and of course fusion requires a truly global effort to make it realizable. So by nature of the collaboration, we work with many international bodies worldwide, which entails quite a lot of travel.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So I'm Stephen Bradnam. I work in the same group as Alex in the Applied Radiation Technology group. So my role is slightly different to Alex's role. So I'm a radiometric analyst. So initially, the first sort of work that I did was in sort of gamma spectroscopy. So this was associated with activation foils which get put inside the jet tokamak, and then you can sort of measure the gamma spectrum from these foils to sort of indicate what the neutron environment is like inside the jet plasma. But of course, MCMP and Monte Carlo simulation is a big part of the work that I do as well, but I'm using it for sort of different applications to Alex. So I've been using it for sort of time of flight neutron detection. So this involves sort of scintillator detectors that can detect gammas and neutrons, and then using sort of a time of flight technology to be able to use the sort of arrays of these detectors to image sort of a neutron source. So for example, something like californium-252, which is a simultaneous fission source. As my role has sort of progressed working with the company, I've sort of done a lot more sort of calculation-based work. So currently I'm working on a large project at the European Spallation Source. So this is currently under construction in the south of Sweden. And here's a picture of me on the right-hand side, visiting the construction site a few years ago. So here's some examples of some of the work that Alex and I do. So on the top left here, we've got a picture of some neutronics analysis that's been done on the ITER reactor. So on the left-hand side of the double plot, you've got the sort of neutron flux environment within inside the plasma and the sort of surrounding materials. And then on the right-hand side, we've actually got the sort of shutdown dose rate field. So this is due to neutron activation of the surrounding materials. And interestingly, on the sort of top right of the graph, of the plot, sorry, you can kind of see these water channels where you see sort of lots of neutron activation. And this is typically a problem that we encounter for sort of short time periods, as you've got sort of coolants flowing around the tokamak. Just below this, we've got an example of the neutron flux that you'd expect to see in the sort of EU demo concept. So demo is it's the demonstration power plant. So Alex will speak to you a little bit more about that later on. And some of the codes that we use to do this analysis, generally it's sort of CAD based. So we use SpaceClaim, which is an ANSYS package to develop our CAD models. And then we use a program called SuperMC, which basically converts these CAD models into Monte Carlo transport models, which we can then run in MCMP or alternative codes such as Serpent or OpenMC. On the top right here is some of the work that I've been involved with. So this is a European Spallation Source. This is the active cells. So this is where they transport some of their waste when it comes out of the main monolith. It goes into these active cells, which are basically just sort of storage pits with these lids sort of lifted onto the top of them. And this is the sort of photon dose rate that you would get with radiation sources in each of these pits. Below on the bottom right is the materials research facility. So this is based on site at Culham, and I've been involved in the sort of commissioning work for that. So in the image, you can kind of see a sodium iodide detector inside a lead collimator, which we designed on site. And then there's some sort of simulation results at the bottom right using MCMP.
Okay, so our mission here at UKAEA is to deliver sustainable fusion energy and maximise its scientific and economic impact. So UKAEA is basically the government arm which is responsible for the development of fusion power. And we're truly a unique facility really worldwide in that we have departments across site ranging from plasma physics to neutronics to materials science, such that we tackle really every different area of fusion. So really our aim is to become a world leader in developing fusion energy through these different areas. Next slide, please, Steve. And to give you some idea on the reactors which we're currently working with, so some of you may have heard of some of these, so MAST, or the Mega Ampere Spherical Tokamak. This is the UK's flagship research reactor based here in Culham. So this has recently come back online. We had first plasma just last month in MAST, so we had a £50 million upgrade, which is basically investigating spherical tokamaks as opposed to sort of conventional toroidal configuration. As employed in JET, so Joint European Torus. This is also here at Culham. This is hosted on behalf of our European partners, and this is currently the world's largest tokamak and also the most successful fusion reactor which there has ever been. Again, this is exciting times for JET. We're starting a new tritium campaign next year. We haven't been able to experiment with tritium, which some of you may know is the main fuel which is used for fusion and allows you to get the large energies out of it. We haven't been able to use tritium since the late 1990s, and we are also the only facility worldwide that is able to experiment with tritium. The sort of natural successor to JET is ITER. So this is being built in the south of France, and you saw me pictured with it earlier. So first plasma here is planned in 2025, and we're busy performing a lot of analysis for this. Really exciting project. This is probably the most complex engineering project which there has ever been, and has the potential to be the most significant science experiment of the 21st century. If it lives up to what we expect, which is this Q value of 10, so 10 times more energy out than what we put in. Looking to the future, obviously our grand aim is to put energy onto the grid, and the demonstration power plant is where we take our first steps to doing that. So the current plan is around 2045. We've constructed the demo, which is where we will want to achieve greater than a value of 10 in the Q value, so 10 times more energy than we put in. And this will be our first steps to hopefully bringing fusion power to the grid.
Okay, so this is our site down in Oxfordshire. So we're around 5 miles south of Oxford. So surprisingly, it is quite a rural location, which is quite nice. So I've been living down here now, and so has Alex for around 4 years. So it's quite a nice place to live because you've got the luxury of the sort of nice sort of rural areas. It's good places to go for walks and etc. But you're also close enough to civilization. So we're only sort of I live in Didcot, which is just south of the site, and that's sort of 45-minute train into London, which is quite nice when we're allowed to do stuff, of course. So the site itself is quite a big complex. So it used to be an RAF base during World War II, and it was sort of commandeered for sort of scientific research in the around the late 60s, early 70s, where they started constructing heavily on this site. So on the right hand side of the image here, you've got this is the JET tokamak that Alex has spoken a lot about. So that was built in the early 80s, and it's been operational ever since. So we're hoping it sort of keeps going until around 2024. That's the current plan. But we've also got lots of other facilities on site. So just to the left of JET sort of highlighted in green, you've got the material research facility, which is the sort of thing that I've been involved with in the commissioning process. So this is where they can handle sort of activated samples, sort of high up to sort of 3.7 terabecquerel cobalt-60 levels of activity. And then they can be sort of chopped up and processed, and then they can do sort of experiments on these samples within that same facility. We've also got the remote applications and challenging environments. So that's circled in blue at the back here. So this is basically born out of the remote handling expertise that we developed through our operation of JET over the years, and they've kind of formed their own sort of branch now of UKAEA. They're involved in a lot of projects, including the ESS project that I've been doing some work on. We've also got MAST, which is our sort of flagship sort of UK tokamak. So that's also on site, which is quite close to where our office is. So the office that Alex and I sit in is just in front of MAST. But this was sort of when we were working on site. So we've been working from home now since March. But luckily, because a lot of the work that Alex and I do is sort of computational based, so it's really had quite a minimal impact on what we can deliver, which is quite good. So some of the developments at Culham in recent times. So in the last few years, we've been rapidly expanding. So I think in the last 5 years, we've around about doubled the amount of staff that we've got now working at UKAEA. So it's really quite exciting times. We've secured £86 million worth of funding. So that, again, I think that was a couple of years ago. And that was to build 2 new facilities. So the hydrogen-3 advanced technology facilities, abbreviated as HEAT, and also the fusion technology facilities. So they've actually started building the FTF now up in Yorkshire, and the civil works are nearly complete on that. So that's exciting times, and they've already started recruiting for roles up there. Master upgrade's been going on for quite a long time. We had some very positive news recently that they've sort of achieved first plasma on that. So that was around about a month ago, and that was a £50 million upgrade to the diverter. It's called the Super X diverter that they've done there. The Oxford Advanced Skills Building, which was on the previous slide, which I failed to mention, but that's an apprentice training scheme. So we have very good connections with the sort of local community with that, and had a very successful scheme for developing roles such as, like, for example, electrical engineers and things that have gone on to work on JET and other programs on site. But I guess the big one for us is the the £220 million STEP program, which we're now into the second year. So this is for basically a sort of scaled up version of MAST for energy production, so a spherical tokamak for energy production. So we're now into the second year of that, and by the end of the 4 years, hopefully we'll have a concept that could be sort of commercially viable. So the bottom left here is it's a picture of when Prince William came to visit the site. So this was when MAST upgrade was unveiled. So this was last year, and then on the right, this is Boris Johnson's visit, which was also last year, and this was shortly after the STEP program was announced.
Okay, so now a bit more specifically to our links with the University of Birmingham. As you know, me and Steve graduated from there a few years ago. But we have very close ties with the university in general. So each year we tend to offer undergraduate and master's internships, which are available depending on funding, of course. So typically the funding requires that the work should contribute to a dissertation or thesis. An example of this is we typically take on 1 to 2 PT&R MSc projects each year within our group at least. We directly support the PT&R course, so our group leader, Lee Packer, has run the lectures on nuclear fusion for the past few years now. And we've also provided support in the past, the MCMP course. We have a number of PhD and research collaborations with the university, so this is across the whole of UKAEA. As you've seen, we have research into many different disciplines in engineering and physics, But in our group, for example, the Applied Radiation Technology group, we currently have one PhD with the University of Birmingham, which is in nuclear instrumentation and gamma spectroscopy. So that there is a link there to the web page where you can find out more information on these placements. This is just a group picture of some of our group last year. This has changed quite a bit now. Actually, we're sort of rapidly evolving as a group. But last year, when this was pictured, I think we had 7 ex-Birmingham students just in our group alone, which you'll appreciate is quite a significant fraction of the amount of people there. And yeah, this is our group stood in front of an illustration of the jet plasma chamber, which you can see there.
Okay, so just a quick note on careers and sort of opportunities at UKAEA. So we have a graduate scheme. So Alex and I went through a sort of slightly different pathway. So we ended up doing summer projects, and then we were sort of employed directly as contractors, and then by UKAEA. But another quite sort of popular route is the graduate scheme. So it takes on around 30 people per year across site in all of these sort of different disciplines that you see listed here. So Alex and I guess would be relevant for most of you, would be the sort of nuclear and engineering analyst kind of pathway. But the main appeal of our graduate scheme is it's very flexible. So you have the option of sort of being assigned a role based on your skills, and if you really like it, you can stay in that role for the whole of your 2 years. Or if you want to get involved with lots of different activities across site, you can move from role to role. So it gives you that option of being very flexible, and also sort of obtaining a sort of broad skill set from different roles across site. But you can also apply for jobs directly. So there's a link at the bottom of the page here. I think last time we checked, there was around 19 vacancies at the moment. But these vary over a wide range of disciplines, and also sort of levels as well. So right the way from sort of graduate entry level roles all the way up to sort of director level positions. But it is worth keeping an eye on this page, and the graduate scheme has got its own dedicated website at the bottom, and I think applications for that open in January. We're committed also for developing our staff. So there's a number of people in our group, at least, that are chartered by the Institute of Physics. But I know, for example, in other roles across the site, then, for example, the people I've worked with at RACE, a lot of them have a mechanical engineering background. So a lot of them are chartered by the Institutes of Mechanical Engineers. We also offer PhD and MSc opportunities. So there's been cases of people that have started working at Culham, and after a while they've done PhD sort of part-time whilst also keeping their job. So that's quite an attractive thing to do as well. And also the mentoring program, which I think could be really useful for graduates and people in their early careers, because the idea of that is that you'll sort of be buddied up with someone who's perhaps sort of more advanced in their career, but also not necessarily in the same sort of discipline as you. So you kind of get a different perspective on things. So it's really quite a nice scheme. I think it's been very successful since they introduced it. So yeah, that's the end of our talk. Thanks a lot for coming along. It's nice to be back, even if it's only in a remote capacity. And we wish you all the best with this year. I guess it's all slightly different for everyone, but we've also got there's a video here at the bottom, which is it's a sort of general sort of introduction to UKAEA and careers at UKAEA. So if you're interested, we can share the slides and you can watch the video. But thanks for listening.
Sure. Thank you very much for your time, guys. It was really interesting. It's really encouraging to see such an involvement of the University of Birmingham with CCFE. Last year, we actually ran a trip to the site, and there's some amazing work going on at CCFE, which I think it would be great to see our students continuing to get involved with. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 5-minute coffee break now, so you can go out, stretch your legs, get a drink. And during that break, if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask our speakers, please pop them in the Q&A, and we can get started at about 15:20. If that's okay with everyone. So I'll pause the recording, and I'll see you at 15:20. Thank you. Okay, it's 15:20. I'll just wait for people to start filtering in and we can get started again. Okay, are all our speakers ready to receive some questions? Great.
Yeah, no, absolutely great.
Yep.
Okay, so our first question is, what summer internships are available and how would you best improve your chances of being selected for one? Anyone feel free to go first.
Yeah, so I do think we have a centralized program within NNL for one. I know Sellafield probably does one as well, but I think it's very much you getting there in early and, you know, sort of doing a little bit of research into, you know, why you'd like to go into the placement, I think is what they're looking for. I think, you know, it isn't necessarily about having on your CV, you know, I did this and I did that. It's showing that, you know, you've researched this and you're interested in it rather than necessarily, and, you know, and being you know, prepared about it and early and organized with it rather than sort of, you know, taking a punt last minute, really.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I can add the situation at UKAEA. We have, again, a sort of centralized scheme. So I believe that the applications will open from January for summer internships. These are a page, I think, which we shared on the slides. So yeah, I mean, the best way is to try and be as quick as possible, because if the right candidates are found, then I think that the roles get filled up pretty quickly. And again, I think the best advice really at this stage, what we're looking for people that are just out of university, is really enthusiasm. So trying to come across enthusiastic, doing a bit of research about the role is really very important. Especially when it's just for a very short period of time. So we're looking for you to do something very specific, and obviously we want you to be motivated to do that specific task. So coming across that way in the interview is very important.
Yeah, Sellafield's quite similar to kind of what Alex talked about in terms of what they look for. But I've just looked in Sellafield's open for applications for year-long placements and summer placements. So that might be worth something looking into that. But yeah, I think if you know about the job you're applying for as much as possible, know about the company, I think that's worth an awful lot, and then try and sell yourself. But I think just know what you're applying for, know what company, know stuff about the company.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, maybe I should add, I don't know how many PT&R students we have with us today, but with PT&R, it's slightly different, I guess, because they're very specific to our department. So generally, Lee Packer, as I mentioned, our group leader, runs the lectures sort of early next year, I imagine. And it's at this point that he will give information about the opportunities available in our group. So these are normally, rather than site-wide, these are done specifically with us, where we just request a CV, for example. So it would be a matter of speaking to Lee when he does the lectures.
Yes, definitely. And that's a good point. It is quite different with PT&R, as you're also industry focused compared to nuclear engineering. So that's a really good point there. So our next question is for Stacy. Stacy, you mentioned working with IAEA for a bit. What was the IAEA like as an organization? Do you know of any UOB alumni employed there?
Am I muted? No. So I went to visit there just with work I did with World Institute Nuclear Security. There's one person who I was on my P&R course with who works there now. She worked at the IEA before coming to Sellafield. She worked in safeguards and then did P&R and returned. It does seem like a very interesting organisation. I've never worked there, but they definitely set the kind of international standards and kind of keep the conversation going, particularly around like nuclear security, which I work in. So I don't know too much specific advice, but I could point you in the direction of people who do. That'll help.
Sure. I mean, maybe you could send us like some links then, and we could look at maybe setting up an event with them at some point in the future. That could be something we could look into.
Yeah, I'll write that down.
Excellent. So our next question is for everyone. What does a typical day at work look like for you? What do you do from when you start until you go home, or nowadays close your laptop?
I'll answer on behalf of Alex and I. So I guess it does depend massively on your role. So for example, Alex and I have different roles. So my role might be more experimental, whereas Alex's is very much sat in front of the computer all day, every day. But typically, if I was doing a day in the office, I'd arrive. Our working day is quite flexible, so generally it's around 8:15 to 4:30. But often people come in later and finish later, or vice versa, come in early. So it's really quite a nice, relaxed working atmosphere. And typically, we'll sort of work on the same sort of. So I would normally have maybe a couple of different projects on the go at once. So at the start of the week, I'll have a think. Yeah, I'll work maybe 3 days on this project, a couple of days on that project. A lot of the analysis work we do involves sort of CAD simplification. So we'll inherit sort of big, detailed engineering models, and we'll sort of deconstruct them, take them apart, get rid of all the sort of features and stuff, and make them into sort of simple models that are suitable for radiation transport calculation. And then we convert them, and we do quite a lot of high performance computing as well. So running MCMP on big supercomputers to basically speed up our calculations. But we also do quite a lot in the laboratory as well. So if I'm in the laboratory, like just last week, I went onto site to do some measurements in the materials research facility. So that was quite nice, just sort of using the detector, collecting data, and then I'll sort of do all the analysis sort of in the office or at home at the moment. But yeah, I guess to add to that at the moment, a lot of meetings as well. So a lot of Zoom calls and Teams calls and so forth. So I'm sure everyone's sort of very familiar with those.
Okay, yeah, I'll jump in then. I guess for me, it's quite flexible. Generally speaking, you work in, for 5 days a week. I tend to get up around, get online about 8 and come off for about 4. But it's very much I've got a series of projects that I need to get done with timelines that aren't necessarily bound by month. There might be some things that take 10 weeks to finish and some things that need to be done urgently. And I think what tends to happen, which is sort of something that I've been sort of got to grips to when I've come out of university, is that you get peaks and troughs, and you're better off planning for the peaks rather than I guess what I used to do is it becomes like an 18-hour stint, doesn't it? And you're trying to sort things out, but that doesn't really work at all, and you rely on other people as well. So it's a case of trying to really work out how other people work and sort of meshing in well with that. But it tends to be, blocks of time on the projects, and then your mornings and your afternoons are spent, early mornings and late afternoons are spent dealing with like meetings and emails and admin and things like that.
For me, so my hours about 8 till about 4:30, working from home. I can still do my job at home, which is great. So my job is kind of collecting information from lots of different stakeholders, and drawing conclusions, looking at trends, and then kind of writing that up in a report, checking that with lots of people, taking that through like governance and lots of committees. So I think it's kind of like investigating and then making conclusions and recommendations and then presenting them. So lots of like team meetings like everyone else, lots of talking to people, lots of looking at open source information on the internet, looking at trends in mental health, what's happening in other companies, what's happening in our company. So yeah, investigating and fact finding, I would probably sum it up as.
It's really great to just hear how broad everyone's work is in the industry. And I think that's something to really take away from today for people watching is, you know, there are so many different routes that you can go down in the nuclear industry. And it's really important to kind of listen to everyone's experiences to work out where you think you would best fit. So our next question is, in light of the pandemic, how has the application process changed at your company? Has it changed at all?
I guess I can answer that one. I think for NNL, yeah, if it hasn't changed at all. If anything, it's meant that we've been recruiting more people. I think we've been incorporated onto programs that are a bit more desk-based, and I think we've had a bit of a rush to go and, you know, expedite our aims and our goals within there. And so I guess the main difference is that you know, everyone's pretty much moved to laptops and are working from home now, which means there's probably a bit more flexibility on what and where you can do your work, really.
Yeah, I think I can add about UKAEA. So I think it's very similar in that in terms of overall recruitment and application, we haven't really slowed down as such because of the global situation. As in our slides, you can see that we currently have quite a significant number of vacancies, and as Steve mentioned, in the last year we've sort of doubled the number of staff on site, going from something like 600 to around 1,200 staff members now at UKAEA across all disciplines which we have. This has really come about because of investment from the government. So we have this new STEP program, which is we've had to recruit significantly for. So this 220 million funding from the government, where we have a very tight deadline basically to come up with a new reactor concept, which is going to be sort of the UK's own project, or the UKAEA's own project, to develop a fusion reactor. And of course we need more skills and expertise to do that. So recruitment hasn't slowed down, and I guess, yeah, in terms of how we go about that, it's just gone from face-to-face to virtual sort of interviews, but hopefully back to some form of normality next year.
Yeah, I think Sellafield's quite similar as well. We've still recruited graduates, still recruiting industrial placement students, some of the placement students, apprenticeships. So in terms of that, that's still going forward, which I think is great. Inducting people online must be quite interesting. But day-to-day life, I think it's mostly if you don't need to work on the Sellafield site and work from home, numbers are slowly returning to normal on the Sellafield site. Well, they're increasing slightly from the start of the pandemic. But if you don't need to work on the Sellafield site, if you just work in an office on site, there's no need. You just work at home or pop into, you have offices in Whitehaven, you can pop in and have a meeting there. So that's the biggest change, is getting people off the Sellafield site.
That's all really encouraging, as obviously, you know, that's been a big worry for people. But I think as well, now that we're kind of progressing through this time, companies are kind of getting a better idea of what people need, and especially students need, from the application process online. So I think, no, that's all very encouraging indeed. So our next question is, for an industrial placement or role at any of your companies, how would you best prepare for an interview, and what is the best piece of advice you can give?
So I'll answer for UKAEA. I mean, you've got we like to see candidates that are sort of forward thinking. We like to see people that have done their homework. I mean, I think that's really important. Like if you're applying for a project, you want to be interested in it fundamentally. So it's always a bit disappointing if we interview candidates and they don't come across as being sort of interested in Fusion and the bigger picture and what we're trying to achieve. So I would recommend, doing your homework on the company and knowing inside out and showing a passion for what the company does, because that can go a long way. But also just getting as much experience as you can. So, for example, some more sort of project specific, like in our area at least, we'd be looking for certain skills. So typically we want to look at people who've got sort of programming skills, people that have even people who've done sort of basic like radiation transport or have an understanding of the principles of radiation transport. So that's something to just read up on some of these areas really. And I think that's. But first of all, be confident. That's really important as well. Like coming across confident in interview and being confident in what you do, then that always comes across very well.
Yeah, I think be yourself, be human, because I think no matter what you say, I think the person interviewing you in the back of their mind will be like, can I work with this person? Will this person fit in? Is this person a good team player? So I think be yourself and try and seem as human as possible, even though it's a really quite rigid, structured, unnatural environment. Yeah, I think that's my biggest advice.
Yeah, just echoing your thoughts there, Stacy. I do think a lot of it is, I guess you classify it as soft skills, but it's your ability to work well with others. And it's not, I guess you can put it as a team player, but you need to, come across as, someone that would be, comfortable in that environment. And also, I think, it's worth really working out what your competencies are as a person, because I think a lot of you are going to graduate with an amazing set of technical skills, but especially with something like what will be a virtual assessment center for NNL, it's going to be quite hard to really show off who you are as a person over the screen. So it's worth at the very least knowing what you bring to the table if you do get into that and you ask that as a question, because technical skills are almost as important as people skills in any sort of industry. So.
Yeah, they're all really good pieces of advice. We've actually got a question that links in quite well that's just come in. What are some useful extracurricular activities that you've done that you think have really helped you in your position now?
Okay, yeah, I go that. I think when I was at Birmingham, I did some support work as a sort of student counsellor. I think that was and within that it was a publicity role on the committee. I thought that was a particularly good way, because you get to, it's that organizational piece of, organizing big events, but then it's also, understanding that you need to use a whole range of skills when you actually are talking to people. It could be just matching their pace or how they speak, or even, considering what emotions are underneath the way that they're feeling. They might be angry, but they might be hurt as well. And it's just developing the soft skills, I think, is a really key one, and the organizational ones.
Yeah, for me, I think my biggest one was I was just a student ambassador for open days, and that kind of showed in interviews okay, you promote the industry, you can talk to people at events, talk to parents, talk to prospective students. At least it kind of demonstrated you can try and encourage people into the industry. And I did quite like doing it fundamentally. So I think that was a key one. I can't really think of any others. I think I mainly started doing extracurricular stuff when I started in the industry. I do wish I kind of got involved a little bit more with NucSoc. But yeah, maybe get involved with NucSoc, that could be a recommendation.
I definitely recommend.
Yeah, those are very good points. I could perhaps just add, I guess anything which shows, I guess, that you're interested in the subject is always helpful. So when we're interviewing people and we see that they've taken part in extracurricular activities which are related to what they're doing, that it shows that they've put in effort in the past to apply for these opportunities, and it shows some sort of willingness to and enthusiasm in the sort of area, which is always good to see. But I mean, at this stage, it doesn't necessarily have to be something related to the thing you're applying for. So obviously Neutronics, which me and Steve do, is a very sort of niche discipline, and we don't expect people to necessarily have Neutronics experience, but any kind of opportunity where even just they've shown good interhuman skills. As I mentioned, it's often a very short period of time which we have for these internships, and fundamentally we have to be able to work with you, and coming across in the interview as, you know, showing a willing and like you're going to be able to communicate clearly. These fundamentals are really very, very important and shouldn't be sort of under stressed.
I think another thing could be there's so many free webinars happening at the moment on varying like nuclear subjects. Even just watching stuff like that and like reading around the nuclear industry and following nuclear accounts on Twitter, it does kind of help build a little background of what's going on in the industry, which could be a good little just a little chat in an interview to show you're a bit more proactive than someone who has no clue what's happening.
I think as well, like we mentioned before, with it being a networking opportunity, I think it can be quite good in an interview if you know people who have worked at the company and they can give you some insight as to what life would be like day to day, which is, like you mentioned, like really useful to go into and shows an interest and kind of motivation for you to want to work there. So our next question is for Stacy. What is the worst case of nuclear insider sabotage, leak, or other threat in UK history that you know of?
Oh. So I think I'm just cautious to answer this question. I think no big incidents are kind of flashing in my mind, which is a good thing. All the kind of significant incidents of there's been a few in America. There's been, I think, one in Russia. So I think it's great that there hasn't been a big significant problem. Touch wood. Let's keep working towards that. But insider incidents also include like low level, like people stealing paper from the photocopier and like low level fraud, and that happens in every industry. So you have to check those incidents and kind of trend that data. But no big incidents coming to my mind, and I probably wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah. Someone has also asked, do you feel that there is a personal kind of risk with working in kind of an insider threat analysis? Like, do you find it difficult day to day just not being able to really talk about projects that you are working on with people?
No, we're trying to get rid of like unnecessary secrecy and working more like collaboratively with different departments, because that's the way forward, rather than security being like a department that's quite siloed. We want a bit more of an integrated approach. So I don't feel like a personal risk.
Awesome. So we've got another question in that's more geared towards applications. In terms of CV writing, what are some of the tips and tricks that you've picked up on over the years? Like, what makes a really good CV stand out?
I'll answer for UKAEA. So ultimately, what you've got to remember is if we're like, for example, in our case, we could be looking at sort of 15, 20 CVs probably for a couple of PTNR projects. So first of all, it needs to stand out. So presentation is key, really. It needs to be clear. It needs to be concise. ideally you don't really want it to be on much more than a page, because as soon as you've got to scroll down, especially in the virtual world now, we're looking at everything from virtually. You know, you've got to scroll down, you might miss things. So keeping it to one page is a really good bit of advice, I think. But also making your sort of skills very clear. So saying like what university you've been to, you know, what skills you've got, what experiences you've got as well. That's very important. So, for example, if you've done like another internship somewhere else before, that's really important, and we'll sort of value that as well. But of course, don't forget about personal things. So if you've you know, for example, you play in a sports team or something like that, or you have sort of hobbies and interests that you think are really important, then they should be on there. But of course, you've got to sort of prioritize and make sure the things that you think are really important are on there.
Yeah, I guess I'd chime in with that. It really helps to make the CV quite clear, because you're going to be going through at least 1,000 of them, if not more. And it is really helpful for them to be able to quickly differentiate. You know, if you've got skills that stand out, those can go forwards. But I guess I'd rather also sort of flag that there's, you know, the CV is only one part of the process. I'd probably recommend, you know, if you're short on time and you are applying, to max out your time on, you know, if they ask you questions that have 300 or 400 words replies, to make sure that you've actually thought through your answers for that. It's like, especially like your cover letter, that is a very big differentiator for, you know, many companies. And I think that, you know, if you can make your reason for why you're doing this really clear in that can sometimes you know, almost clear the steps that you would probably, that would differentiate you for someone that might have, you know, a bit more of a glowing CV.
I think for me, I've always liked the phrase like show, don't tell. So kind of say what you've done rather than kind of use language like I'm passionate about the nuclear industry. You could like say what you've done, what you've read. I think that's a lot stronger than kind of just fluffy CV words or fluffy like covering letter words. People kind of want to know, what have you done? What have you learned? Like the hard things you got from it.
Yeah, I suppose especially with nuclear roles, as like you mentioned with CCFE, there are so many people from Birmingham working there. Everyone will have kind of covered the same modules, so it's important that you can set yourself apart, I suppose. And extracurriculars are the way really to do that and to enrich your own learning. So our next question is, and this is our penultimate question tonight. So how does the work you do in a graduate role compare to university work? Do you apply things you learned in university directly, or is it very different?
Okay, I can perhaps start. So one of the big things that I really like actually about working at UKAEA is that our work is very sort of academic and research based. So obviously in neutronics, with our sort of day-to-day simulations, we have to apply a lot of fundamental physics, and obviously we cover a lot of different things on the physics course that we did at Birmingham, but nonetheless there are quite a few aspects which I often have to think back on, and obviously mathematics is very fundamental to what we do, and there's quite a lot of theory underpinning our work. So it's quite often that we have to look back on the work which we did at university, which is quite unique, I guess, from the people that do a physics degree. Obviously, a lot of straight physics is very applied, and transferring that to industry in terms of the specifics is not so common. But obviously, in our job, where it is in essence a nuclear physics role, there is a strong application of what we learn, which is certainly one of the things which is good. Obviously, from PT&R, nuclear fusion was only a very small aspect of that, but nonetheless, the rest of the nuclear physics, which was taught in the fission-related modules, is obviously still, a lot of it is still very relevant, and we still use day to day, in fact.
Yeah, I'd just a sort of similar view as well. I feel like the Nuke Eng degree was a bit of a godsend. I feel like I use loads of it every day, and even if it's not probably to that level of depth, like I don't play about with Boltzmann equations and things like that. But I guess Alex and the neutronics guys do as well. But like it's really helpful knowing what other people do. I think a lot of people that studied, less non like more vocational courses, but weren't material science based and weren't nuclear science based, they're at a bit of a disadvantage because you have a very good idea what PIE is. You have a very good idea what neutronics is. You know why the people are there, and that really can help you put people together. And I think that's a really key skill.
Yeah. I don't use my degree, like technical side of my degree, in my day job, but I really like this, like having that solid foundation in so many aspects of the nuclear industry, and then that definitely helps my thinking. But I'm not doing anything technical. I'm not coding. I'm not doing any equations, which I love, because I don't want to see quantum mechanics ever again. So I think you can definitely pick and choose how much you want to follow the technical path, or you could go down a little bit more of a fluffy route like me. So yeah, I apply my degree. I don't use the technical side at all.
Okay, thank you. So this will be our final question tonight, and it's a fun question. So what are some of your fondest memories from your time at Birmingham? So anything from nuclear engineering or PTNR or nuclear science and materials?
Oh, there's loads. I can't just think. I think that's the thing. You go past Birmingham and you get all those memories come back, don't they? And that's nice. But I think I remember just sitting in METMAT lectures with about like 10 other people, and you just walk in there and you're chatting for ages. I think that's something that I do sorely miss. And I guess probably, I think in first year, I think Freya took us around the Picasso, see a Picasso painting in the Barber Institute once, instead of actually teaching us tutorials. And that was quite fun. Yeah, China as well. China was fantastic. I don't know if you guys still offer that or not. Probably not for this year, but like, if that was an absolute like once in a lifetime opportunity. I recommend anyone that is interested in that to go and apply for that, because that was just fantastic.
Yeah, I've got loads of memories as well, and I'm kind of flashing back. I miss like walking into a lecture theatre and all your friends are there, and you can kind of like pass notes to each other. You should be listening, but yeah, kind of that sort of thing. But also because problem sheets and like deadlines can be quite difficult, kind of you do grow as like a little group when you go through like a hard deadline or like trying to get work done. So through tough times, you do kind of really build that bond, which I don't want to say I miss like exams or deadlines, but I like that community and being able to meet up like really quickly because you'll live like a few streets away. I like that, and I do miss that. And it goes by so quickly, so please make use of it.
Yeah, I already miss being sat in NucSoc kind of events or having like a buffet in the METMAT foyer. I really miss those already.
Yeah, that's the real casualty of this crisis, isn't it? It's those buffets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the thing I remember really enjoying about the PTNR course was we did a trip to Sellafield. I don't know if that's still a thing. Well, I guess it won't happen this year, but in previous years, we always used to go to Sellafield for a day, and we did sort of different activities. And it was great. It's the first time I'd ever been to like a nuclear site of any description. And it was really quite sort of inspiring, really, to see sort of the scale of the place and all the activities that go on there. But also on top of that, it was a really good opportunity to socialise with all the people on the PTNR course that maybe I hadn't socialised with as much during the course, because it's very different being in a sort of lecture environment to actually like staying overnight somewhere. And also like socialising with the lecturers as well. So I don't know if Dave Forrest is still around on the PTNR course, but he was there with us, and he sort of spent the evening with us. It was really nice just chatting with Dave and some of the other people as well.
Okay, so if anyone doesn't have anything else to add, we can look at closing the event. I'd love to give a really big thank you to all of our speakers today. Thank you so much for volunteering your time. It's been really enriching just listening to what everyone is up to nowadays. And I think it's really, really useful for our students to see kind of people who were in their position and are now doing really great things in the industry, and such a broad variety of different work as well. So Molly is going to post a questionnaire in the chat. So please, if you have time, fill that out and let us know on how we can improve or what's went well today. Any feedback is really, really appreciated. And also a big thank you to Molly today for helping me put the event together and for looking after the questions. Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Have a really good evening, everyone.
Thank you, you too.
Yeah, Emily.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Emily.
Bye.